Hey everyone, welcome back to Citywide Blackout, your home for music, movies, and more. I'm your host, Max Bowen. In this episode, I'm chatting with author Christine Meade for her new book, The Way You Burn, available through She Writes Press. The book opens with the original ending, as David returns to his New Hampshire cabin to find it on fire, with his girlfriend Hope the likely person behind it. This book explores David's attempts to understand the complicated pasts of his loved ones. We talk a lot about the changes this book underwent since Christine first wrote it. We also look at releasing a new book amidst the pandemic, and how that entire process has had to change. And one thing you probably noticed is that the opening and closing tracks are different. This is provided by the amazing Sarikaiden. Check out his music and his podcast, the links provided in the description. Joining me now, we are talking to author Christine Meade for her debut novel, The Way You Burn, which is available through Amazon.com, but also through your local bookseller. If you happen to be in the Rhode Island area, you can head down to Stillwater Books in Pawtucket, Rhode Island. They have recently reopened, but if your store isn't up and running yet, you can certainly email them, call them. They're likely taking orders that way. But however you get this book, please leave a review. Authors love to see it. They want to see reviews. It can be a full essay. It can be a couple words, whatever. Just please do that. But now, on with the show. Christine, thank you for joining me. It is awesome talking to you.
Thank you, Max. I'm excited to be here.
All right. So, as I mentioned before, this book is your debut novel. I love talking to first-time writers because how they got into this is really a wonderful story. And it's never the same story twice, actually. What got you into doing this? What made you decide, okay, I'm going to write a book?
Yeah, so I was one of those, weird kids where I wanted to write a book since I was about elementary school. I was probably 6 years old when I started trying to write books. So I think I wrote my first terrible novel in 5th grade. And
hey, me too.
And yeah, there's, we're out there. And and it only took me, a couple more decades to get my first book published. So, I started writing more seriously, I'd say, after my undergraduate degree, around the time I was about 20. And then this book took me, I wrote it during my MFA program, which I got when I was about in my mid-20s. And then I left it, came back to it more recently, and then just got it published. So
when you came back to the book, did you like it all, what you saw? Did you do this gut it, start over again kind of thing?
The story originally was sort of less linear than it is now. So I did a big reorganization of the book overall. I did also take out an entire character, which was about 10,000 words. And that was... Yeah, so that's a weird thing, to be erasing someone. I did, over the course of almost 300 pages. So it's an interesting task to take on.
You just get to play God, basically.
It's definitely playing God.
Thanos snap, and all of a sudden, gone they go.
Exactly. It's a strange feeling.
Taking this person out, obviously a significant change to the book. Did you have to rewrite the ending to it too?
Yeah, I definitely changed the ending for sure. And it made more sense, where it ended now, I think. When you have those insights into how to revise, I think they're worth following through because you end up finding the pace of the book, the real ending of the book, the important parts, I think.
What would you say was the most important part for you?
That's a great question. I think it definitely had to do with getting the right feeling between David and Hope. David's the main protagonist in the book, and the book circles around his relationship with this woman named Hope. And I really wanted to make sure that the way their relationship ends, that's not giving it away because you learn on the first page that their relationship ends. So
spoilers.
I wanted to make sure the way things ended for them was on the right note.
The opening of this book is very, very powerful. So to give people a quick bit of background, this book, as you mentioned, does focus on David and Hope. And the book is really all about David exploring his family and the secrets that he didn't know they had, just learning all these things that were kept from him. And it kind of kicks off with his cabin burning to the ground. And likely Hope is the one behind it. And it's actually kind of it's written almost as a goodbye letter to Hope. This is not a first person or a third person. It's a second person. Why go with this particular perspective?
Yeah, that's a great question. I thought it was important for David, as he's sort of retelling the events over the course of this year that the book takes place. I wanted to have Hope in mind for David as he's telling the story, essentially, as he's narrating the story. So in writing it to her, it's both a reflection of his experience and what he took away from the course of the year, as well as his explanation of how things happened to her. He comes to realize a lot, and he wants to let Hope know that by the end, I think.
Now, the secrets which he finds out about his family, I'm guessing they're not very boring secrets. I'm guessing this is very earth-shattering. Mm-hmm. Without giving us too much away, because I want people to go and get the book, what kinds of things does he learn about his family?
He inherits this cabin in the woods in New Hampshire from his late grandfather. So that's what he decides to try to live there for a year. And he learns a lot about his grandfather's past that he didn't know, that was never revealed to, his immediate family, that has a huge bearing on his father, himself, his brother, and their past. So, without giving too much away, there's a lot about the origins of his family's life kind of hidden in the woods of New Hampshire there. And he really starts to unravel that over the course of the year.
When I read the first chapter, mm-hmm. Cabin in the woods, left by his grandfather, I thought, oh, God, this is not going to be like a horror story, is it? Because it has all the hallmarks of it.
No, it is not a horror story. No, it's not necessarily my forte. So
Okay. But is what David learns, is it just kind of just shake him to his core? I mean, because it sounds like he's a changed person from what I found in some of the earlier chapters.
Yeah, there's definitely a mystery, elements to this story. There's a suspense that's underlying, the pages throughout, I would say. And it shakes not only him, but his family, and him in a couple different ways. Because not only does he learn about his family's kind of hidden past, but he also learns about his girlfriend Hope's hidden past as well. And those two storylines kind of overlap and, weave through each other throughout.
Let's talk about Hope, because I love her character. I love the way that she's just this very take charge kind of person, but not in an aggressive way. She just doesn't care, frankly. She just kind of goes through life and does what she wants. Where'd she come from?
Honestly, she's not, I would say, based off of anyone in particular, but I was really interested in the idea of pulling together aspects of different people I knew who were kind of complicated, more, there's more going on beneath the surface than you're able to see. And I think that's really what's going on with Hope. What you're presented with is one thing, but what's going on beneath the surface is so much more complicated. And, often in life, a lot of people we meet are like that, know.
And in particular with Hope's surface, she one things that that gets mentioned early on is the scars she has. It's right. It definitely speaks to what she's been through and experienced. But I don't get the sense that she's really a hard person because of it. Because she's not bitter about it. She's not angry about it. It's just there.
Right. Yeah. She sort of owns these physical scars they're on her face, they're on her cheek, they're unavoidable, and she owns them, and she doesn't try to hide it. And I think it plays into the importance of the element of fire in this book as well. Like you mentioned, the first couple pages, we see David's cabin burning, and also, we have Hope, these scars, these burned scars on her face as well. So I think the element of fire comes not only on the surface, but again, below the surface as well. There is a burning, a turmoil within Hope that, comes through later in the book.
Would you say David or Hope are either good or evil in a story, or is their role a little more in the middle?
Yeah, that's really interesting. I would say definitely in the middle. I think no one's, one way or the other. So I try to play it that, at some point David does think, oh my God, Hope's the worst. She is evil. but then he, and when you're going through breakups, you tend to go in that direction. But the more he learns, the more he realizes, that's not necessarily the case. It's a lot more complicated than that.
Do you think Hope or David are someone that you like?
I think I like David, or maybe like who David will become as he's growing up. But my favorite character in the book, I would say, is there's an older man that ends up becoming important to David's life. His name's Harold. And I think he's probably my favorite character.
Going back a bit to what you mentioned earlier about the character that you had to eliminate, was that a hard thing to do? I mean, killing off a character is never easy.
Yeah, and honestly, the character I got rid of, like, I liked her. You know, she was a character I liked, but I realized it was too much. There's too much going on in the book, and I needed to pare back. So essentially, it's challenging, you know, from the writing perspective, because you really have to go through each line and make sure there's no mention, you know, of this character. There's in any of the scenes or in David's thoughts, and you kind of have to very carefully go through. But there was something kind of liberating about it as well, I think, to make those big drastic cuts in the revision process. It's sort of fun.
And I think that's the hardest thing, especially for a first book,
right?
To be told, okay, this thing has to go, where this has taken literally years of your life. Yeah, I know. It's a big one. And another thing for me was finding the right place to start the book. I think that was something that I moved around a lot. So I think that's a big part of the revision process as well, is where do you start, you know, and that plays a lot into where you end up. Yeah, in a way you kind of start at the end almost.
Exactly. Yeah, so I ended up pulling from the end, bringing it back to the beginning, and having that thread throughout.
You're giving us, okay, cabin in the woods, burns to the ground, Hope probably did it. What?
Yeah, what happened?
Yeah, exactly. Wait, how did we get here exactly?
Yeah, I like when I see that in other books too as well. So.
Okay. Now, that wasn't the original plan though, right? You said that you kind of took that from the ending? Yeah,
I took that from the ending. You know, at first I had it more... I had it like laid out as things would happen chronologically, and it was falling a little flat. I think we needed some hint of where we were ending up before we get into the backstory. So
let's talk settings, because as we talked earlier prior to the show, you are a Boston cat, and I'm a former Boston cat.
Yeah.
And this book takes place in Boston, and reading this book, I could definitely tell she knows the city really well. Just like the description of the setting and all of it. When it came time to write it, did you ever do any location scouting to kind of find like the right spots to do this?
Yeah, not really, honestly, just because I'd spent so much time. And I would say the book's like, you know, it's Boston, and then he also has his time at the cabin in New Hampshire too. So we get those two, you know, strong settings. But I went to undergrad in Boston, so I lived there. I'm from around there. So I know it well enough that I could pretty quickly call up certain locations that I wanted to, you know, have a role in the beginning of the book, especially.
It definitely made me pine for my days living there. Like, just reading, I was like, oh, man, I miss those times.
Yeah, especially there starts off like kind of summer in the city, and there's a special feel to that, I think.
Describing the areas, Newbury Street and Cambridge. Oh my God, I was like, the good old days, you know, because I spent like eight years living there in Fenway, and then in Brighton, and then in Somerville. So
exactly. Yeah, he lives in Alston to start off at.
Oh, Alston.
I know, right?
Oh, Alston.
Through there.
Was this your first choice for location?
I guess I never considered any other location. It was nice to be able to have both, you know, Boston and some of the surrounding areas, as well as a small town in New Hampshire. So I kind of was able to balance that out, which was fun. I really like writing settings. So it was nice to have a little bit. You know, we have the city as well as the kind of nature in the middle of nowhere as well.
Did you have to do any world building to kind of fill in the gaps?
Not really for this, because it's more kind of realistic fiction in this particular novel. So it was definitely drawn from places and scenarios that I could kind of easily picture in my head that I think readers will be able to as well. It's not too, you know, far-fetched that I'd really have to do world building.
Yeah, I especially liked, I think it was in the first couple chapters when the friends are going for their after, like, drinking breakfast.
Yeah,
I was like, I've been there before so many times.
Yeah, it's familiar. You know, he's with his roommates. It's like everyone's kind of gone through that phase. And I think that's what interested me about writing from David's point of view, he's a mid to early to mid 20s character, a couple years out of college. It's an interesting perspective. There's a lot that I think is relatable for many people who have lived through that time period and especially, in Boston and such. But, you learn a lot during that early to mid 20s time. And I think that it's an interesting place to write from.
Mm-hmm. I definitely like the way that the two characters play off each other. Dave is definitely the safe guy,
yes,
the
right.
reasonable guy. And Hope is the one to literally climb up a tree and jump out of it. This happens in chapter 4, I think.
And I think that's why David is drawn to Hope. She's very different than him, and she kind of pushes the envelope and pushes his boundaries, in a lot of different ways, which is why he's drawn to her, because she's challenging him in a way that he hasn't been before.
Where this was your first book, was it difficult to finally send it off to say, okay, done, no more changes?
Yes, 100%. I think that's one of the hardest things. I don't know how many times I thought, I'm going to read through this one more time and make sure there's not, some other changes I have to make. And yeah, absolutely. I did that many, many times, I think, before finally biting the bullet.
Right, yeah. It's so hard, too, especially because it's your first thing. It's like, this is your child. This is
right.
The thing that you've created, this entire universe of characters. When you wrote this, did you plan it out?
I am not an outliner, and I desperately want to be. I'm trying to write I'm in the process of writing a new book now, and I was like, I'm going to outline this. It's going to be beautiful. I'm going to know exactly which each chapter is going. And I wrote down 3 things, and I was like, no, I'm giving up on the outline. There's something I love about the process of, I guess, seeing where things go and sort of brainstorming as I go along and as I work through it. So having a seed of an idea or a very rough skeleton of where I may want to go with a story. And then the process of discovery, I don't know. It's so exciting, I think, as a writer, that it's hard for me to plan it out beforehand.
Yeah, I'm very much the same way. I'm not really a planner. I'm more like a pantser. Just go and kind of see where it takes. And sometimes you may paint yourself into a corner. It's going to happen,
right.
But that's just part of the journey.
Yeah, and I do think that if, for those of us who aren't outliners, you end up doing more revision on the back end, right? Whereas if you had planned it all out carefully, there's not as much revising later. But I kind of like the really messy first draft. I like taking it wherever it goes. Maybe I end up having to cut a character or a whole city or whatever it may be later, but it's kind of worth it for the journey.
Plus, now I get to release the uncut version down the road.
Right, yes. The embarrassing 500-page uncut version.
I don't know what to say to that.
There's a market for that, yeah.
You never know. You never know.
That's true.
Did this end the way you expected?
Yeah, I guess it did in a way, to a certain degree. I knew David and Hope's relationship wasn't going to last. But in that early drafting process, I think so much came up that I wasn't really expecting, and that ended up playing an important part at the end as well. And so that part I wasn't really anticipating. The more of his family's background and such.
Did you kind of surprise yourself with some of the secrets that popped up? Oh wow, this was totally unexpected.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I pull a lot from stories people have told me, or little snippets of conversations I've heard. There's so many details that get woven in, from your subconscious, I think, when you're writing in that way that you don't even realize at the time. And then, it's funny, I've had family members read the book now and such, and they're like, oh, wow, that's that, story grandma told us all those years ago. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I didn't even realize that. So there's a lot of those surprises that pop up, I think.
As mentioned earlier, this was your first book, but you are by no means new to the writing world. You have your BA in English and Journalism and your MFA in Creative Writing. Was there anything new for you to learn to write this book, or did you learn anything new about kind of the book writing process as you were going through it?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think I learned the most about the revision process. I think there's so much work that is done in the revision process. And I think really pulling this apart and going kind of line by line and section by section and reworking so much, especially putting it aside for a while and then coming back to it, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work, but it's pretty exciting, what you're able to do in that transformation process from like first draft to, 400th draft by the time you're done with it. But I think I learned a lot about editing and a lot about revision from getting this from draft to publication.
Mm-hmm. And you also work as an editor too, correct?
Yes, exactly. So it's helped me too, because I love helping other people, make the best of their manuscripts as well. I think I've kind of honed in on seeing where the gems are in someone else's writing, and it helps me with my own books. I can see like, okay, this character, it's not doing much, gotta go, So it's great.
How was it being on like the other end of that though?
Yeah, I mean, I like getting feedback and edits, especially because, I got an MFA. I'm used to the workshop model. I've had also like a writing group for probably like a decade now. So, we meet regularly every other week. And so I'm used to getting feedback, and I'm used to getting regular, response and edits in my work. So I like edits because I feel like I learn from them each time. And I think you're able to discern as the writer what rings true as an edit you want to make, or something that, advice that you can skip because it doesn't feel right for your work.
Have you ever done that? Someone tried to like give you advice and you were like, nope, sorry, I'm keeping it. Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. Well, because some people are like, what, chapter 5 needs like an alien. And you're like, no, there's no aliens in this story, but thank you. So I feel like it's usually pretty clear, the advice that you're, either going to take or not take.
Aliens would definitely be a big swerve in this book.
Right?
I wouldn't see it coming. I'd be genuinely surprised.
Maybe I should have added the alien. Who knows?
Maybe you should have had Hope be an alien.
Right? That would have really made the book, I think.
Would have made me scratch my head a bit, definitely.
Right. Yeah, true. Different genre.
Exactly. Or how about David's a vampire? How about that?
Yes. Yeah. Just vampire and an alien. I don't know if that's been done yet.
I don't think so, actually. I think this would be a new thing, a different sci-fi fantasy crossover.
That's perfect. Crossovers are big, so.
Yeah, they definitely are.
Yeah.
They definitely are. But going to writing groups, I did read your blog post about this, about the importance of having a writing group. And I definitely agree. You can't be edited by like your best friend. They're always going to pull their punches. You got to get strangers, really. Professional strangers to read your stuff, because they'll be honest about stuff.
Right.
How did it help you?
It's hard to see your book for what it is when you're in the weeds for so long and so many hours and years even, that you really need an outside perspective to kind of shine the light on the dark corners of your book that you're missing. And I think that's what it's really helped me, is to give some perspective to the places that I may be glossing over and not realize that, this needs more attention, or the pacing is off here. It's having someone who can read your writing as a reader would and give you an objective opinion is so valuable, I think, for a writer.
I think it can be hard for some writers because they can be sometimes very introverted.
Yes.
Where they spend their whole time just, at their computer, and then just suddenly be like, I got to go out in public and talk to people.
Yeah.
But I do think you got to take that step, because otherwise your book's going to only get so far.
Right. And I mean, I think I've learned a lot, especially with this being my first book. There's so much that goes on in terms of marketing and publicity and social media, that our tendency as writers may be, like you said, to stay behind the computer screen and, type away. But you really do have to get comfortable with that ability to kind of put it out there in the world as often and, as far reaching as you're able to.
How does one find, or even better, to create a writing group?
Yeah, I love when people ask that question, because I think it's so important, because I sort of curated my own writing group from different writing conferences that I've went to. So one of the people in my writing group is from my MFA program. One is from a writing conference I went to in New York. One is from a writing residency I went to. So I sort of have collected these people from different times that I've been involved in writing communities, and found people that I resonated with, that I respected them as writers, as readers. I think you also want to take people that you trust their feedback in some way, that you you vibe with them in a way that you know they're going to give you something that's valuable to work with, and that you can do the same for them in return. So that's been so helpful. And people that have the same goals as you too, that same level of seriousness, I think is important.
And I think that even like right now, where we can't actually meet in person for a while, you can always just do like a virtual thing. You can do like a Google Hangouts. You can do it on Skype and so forth. There's no real reason to not keep your groups going, or even to start new ones. Because right now, some of us only have time to write. Time.
I know, right? And my group, like, we're not all local. We have people. One of the girls lives in Canada. One lives in New York City. So we've been doing our groups via Skype the whole time, anyway. So yeah, it's great because you can reach people from all over and find those. Other voices that are good sounding boards for your writing.
What would you say are some of the better pieces of advice that you've gotten from your time working with different writing groups?
I think a lot of it has to do with consistency, making sure the voice is consistent throughout, the pacing makes sense throughout, the tone is, consistent throughout. And I think when you're working on something that's novel length, maybe you pick it up and then put it down for a while, or you write this chapter and then you skip ahead and you write that chapter, so there's a lot of space that can get, in between the pages and the chapters of the book, and making sure that you have things consistent throughout can be hard to tell on your own. So that's a huge, huge thing, that having someone else read your work to give you feedback on and advice on is really valuable.
Do you think you've changed much as a writer from when you first started writing the book to where you are now?
Yes, I think hugely. I began writing the book when I was first getting my MFA and first kind of getting really serious about writing. And then I left it for years, honestly. And I think that the time that the life experience that I had, just the other things that I wrote in between that, it really gave me a new perspective, that when I came in with a kind of revising cap on, I was able to add a lot more depth to it, I think.
I'm curious if when you read the original book that you wrote, now, did you have any moments where you kind of cringe, oh God, I can't believe I put that in there?
Oh, I'm sure. First draft, you always have those moments where you're like, oh, this is terrible or embarrassing.
What was I thinking?
Alternatively, though, you find those sections where you're like, I wrote this, and it almost feels like an out-of-body experience, that you're like, this doesn't even sound like, do I even know what that word means? So yeah, I think you'll get both of those when reading through old drafts.
Now, one thing I saw on your site which really intrigued me is that you've gone the virtual book tour route. Of course, right now, there are no book festivals, no book expos, no book conventions. This is your only way of getting things out there. Exactly. How did you go about planning this, and when did that whole process start?
Yeah, honestly, I didn't plan it till it was last minute. Things came in March, essentially a couple weeks before my book was coming out. So it definitely was a quick pivot. Luckily, there's so much to do with bookstagrammers on Instagram, that are reading and promoting books. So a lot of those kind of publicity was happening anyways. But they definitely called on writers to make a big shift. I did a Facebook Live book launch, and I got to do some interviews with Facebook, other interviews with Facebook Live that were kind of posted online. I got to do some podcasts and some radio interviews and such. So it was a quick pivot, but it was really cool to see how the writing community kind of came together to help support authors like myself who were, suddenly sort of stranded with just there's no open bookstores. There's no way to kind of connect in person with readers. So it definitely was a shift, but, it was more exciting than I expected. I think it was still fun to have those opportunities to connect with people virtually.
And it's kind of sad because I know we keep hearing about different things being canceled. Expos, conventions being pushed off. I think the things in the fall are kind of safe for now, but anything in the summertime, gone.
I know.
But do you think this will have any kind of long-term impacts on the indie book scene, or is it too fluid to kind of be damaged by this.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I've read some articles that saying like book sales have been up since everything's closing down. Like people are reading more. And I was shocked at how many people reached out to me like a couple days after they got the book to be like, I read the book. It was great, you know. And I'm like, really? You already read it? You know, I feel like a lot of times you have your stack of books and you're like, oh, I'll get to it, but I have work and I have this. And, you know, I think more people are reading more books faster as well because there's more time to read. So I don't know. I think it's more of a challenge to get in front of readers for sure. But I think there's more people reading. So a bit of a conundrum, I guess.
Yeah. Are you like looking to any other like expos or festivals, or are you just saying just forget that for now?
I mean, I feel like it's hard to commit. You know, I just saw something too that the Boston Marathon, which they rescheduled for the fall, is now canceled.
Yep.
And yeah, so, you know, the Boston Book Festival is in October, and that's, you know, a fun event where there's tons of writers. And I love, you know, as a writer and a reader, I love going out to different literary events and being as much of a part of my literary community as I can in person. Like I love going to random readings and craft talks, and I try to go to those things whenever I can, or festivals or conferences in Boston. But I feel like it's hard to kind of commit or plan at this point because no one knows what's happening. You know, no one knows where it's going, and it's not going away anytime soon. So
I usually cover a lot of the Comic-Cons around here because it's a great place to meet fantasy, horror, or sci-fi writers. And I'm supposed to go to a couple like fall things. I'm like, please happen, please.
I know.
Just kind of like
right?
hold my breath and saying, okay, well, we'll see what goes on.
I know. It's kind of sad. You know, you end up missing out on these like great opportunities to connect and meet new people. And you know, I really enjoy it. But
yeah, I've made like some friends too that I usually see at some of these events, but either they're like cosplayers or writers who just, you know, work the circuit. And it's like, I'll see you whenever I see you. You know, it's kind of hard to say.
Yeah. And it's weird, especially with the book. You know, I think I always imagined with, you know, oh, my book launch, and that'll be so fun, and I'll sign my book and I'll get to meet people and, you know, meet other writers who are launching around the same time. And, you know, like that in-person community, I think, you know, is definitely miss out on that for sure.
There was one guest I spoke to recently. He had his book release was supposed to be in April, which still happened. He had a huge party planned. 200 people were going to be there. Yeah. Gone.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Everything I had planned, you know, had to be wiped out for an online version. So.
Yeah. Heartbreaking.
I know.
Do you feel, though, that you got a pretty, like, similar response to, like, the online versions that you would have gotten from, like, an in-person event?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, especially, you know, like I said, I'm from the Boston area, and both sides of my family are from the Boston area. So I was looking forward to having like my large Irish family coming out for the event. But it was great to see, you know, just to hear all the supportive responses I got from my own community and my own network, you know, online as well. It still makes you feel like, okay, all of these years, you know, working in your bubble on your project alone, it's worth it. You know, readers are getting something out of it and they're enjoying it. And, you know, that's what you write for. So
I also want to ask about She Writes Press, which is the company which your book is available through. And you can go to shewritespress.com.
Yeah.
How'd you find them, and what's it been like working with them?
There's a big writing conference in Boston every spring, also was canceled this year, unfortunately, the Muse in the Marketplace. And I went to a panel a couple years ago, and they were talking about the future of publishing. And one of the, you know, the publishers that came up was She Writes Press. And, you know, it's an all women run publishing company, and they only publish women authors. And I found what they were doing really different, and they were trying to be innovative and to really, you know, bring forward writers who, you know, maybe will get passed over by the big five because they don't have like a massive platform or, you know, a celebrity name or, you know, a big agent. And so I liked that She Writes Press was really trying to highlight and promote these, you know, great books that would be passed over otherwise. So it was great working with them, especially I would say there's a really supportive community of writers that have been published by She Writes Press. So just through the Facebook group alone, I've met so many great other writers that have been published by them, and everyone's very supportive and answers questions and helps promote each other. And that part of it has been really special.
Any writers that you were particularly happy to find through the group?
Yeah, there's a couple memoirs, I would say, that I have read that, especially because, I tend to only write fiction, but I really like reading memoirs as well. So, and I'm sorry because I can't think of the titles off the top of my head, but I read a couple memoirs by authors and they've won awards. They're really compelling, and especially from the female perspective. So whether it was about, I read one that had to do with motherhood and, the challenges of motherhood. And it was really interesting and really compelling and just different than what I would write myself. So I like to, expand into other genres too.
One thing I'm seeing is that I'm not sure if it's getting easier, but I'm definitely seeing a lot of indie writing companies like She Writes Press out there. I'm definitely thinking that it's becoming a little easier for the indie writers these days to get their stuff out there because there's so many different ways to do it, even if you just like self-publish. Right.
Yeah, I mean, that's the nice thing. And as someone who helps people edit their books as well, I'll often talk with the writers I work with about the different types of publication paths they can go on, whether they want to self-publish, and there's so many options for that, or do they want to do a hybrid route, or do they want to try to find an agent and go a more traditional route. So it's nice that things are opening up, so more books that are great and should be read are getting out there. So I like that, it's expanding beyond the big five publishing house, and it can get more people out there that, may not have been found otherwise.
Now, did you try to go the traditional route of working with like the big five or some other like major publisher?
Yeah, so this actually isn't the first book I've ever written. I wrote another book before this that I queried for and I got an agent for, and then the agent left the company before they were able to send it out to publishers. So I felt like I was back at square one again, which is, it's a common story that will happen. It made me, I think going through that process made me kind of rethink, because it's a lot of work trying to get, an agent when you're just in the slush pile of a million, they get so many queries from different authors and such. So it made me really rethink about like, okay, what other options to publish are there instead of going the agent route. So with this book, I decided to, once I heard about She Writes Press, I was like, oh, this hybrid publishing. I like that there's more, gives the author more kind of control, but you still get the support and like a really high quality publication that you would at one of the big five publishing houses.
Well, Christine, I've loved talking to you. I cannot wait to get back to the book, The Way You Burn. You can get it through Amazon or your local booksellers. And where can folks go to learn more about you and to check out your work?
Yeah, sure. So my website is www.christine-meade.com. And yeah, I have links to my book up there and some blog posts and my editing work and everything. So yeah, thank you, Max. It's been great speaking with you.
Hey guys, what's going on? This is Brian Murphy from One Time Mountain, and you're listening to Citywide Blackout with Max Bowen.
Rock on.
All right, folks, that brings this episode to a close. Be sure to check out the show on Facebook under Citywide Blackout, Twitter and Instagram under Citywide Max, and check out citywideblackout.blogspot.com. Once again, big thanks to Sarikaiden for providing the epic intro and closing tracks for the show. You can listen to the show on Podbean, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, and every Saturday at 10 p.m. on Boston Free Radio. As always, keep those ears open.